Well, howdy guys, and welcome to the Mark Driscoll Show. We are so excited you're tuning in today. We have a jam-packed show for you. We talk about, is the Pope the Antichrist, and why is he so pro-Islam? Is Congress completely gone? We'll get into the gay dads that are mocking their baby, and we may bring physical violence against them. And then we get into a gay pastor. He's not actually gay, allegedly. David French and Allie Beth Stuckey's interview this week. So you don't want to miss any of the segments. Stay tuned all the way through. Thank you for tuning in.
I know that in Europe there are many times fears that are present but oftentimes generated by people who are against immigration and trying to keep out people who may be from another country, another religion, another race. And in that sense, I would say that we all need to work together. One of the values of this trip is precisely to raise the world's attention to the possibility that dialogue and friendship between Muslims and Christians is possible. I think one of the great lessons that Lebanon can teach to the world is precisely showing a land where Islam, Christianity are both present and are respected, and that there is a possibility to live together, to be friends. Stories, testimony, witnesses that we heard even in the past 2 days of people helping each other, Christians with Muslims, both of whom had their villages destroyed, for example, of saying we can come together and work together. I think those are lessons that would be important also to be heard in Europe or North America.
So, Pastor Mark, it would appear that we have our, maybe our first woke pope. Yeah. He's a man, I looked it up, he's a man with an associate's degree in chemistry, worked in a food processing plant, and then did some stuff in between there, became the most politically influential religious voice on the planet. And since he has used that platform to bless same-sex couples, condemn capitalism, lecture on climate policy, bless Iraq, and call Christian conservatives dangerous. So what is your scorecard for this Pope over the first year of his...
Yeah, well, it's a conundrum because he'll be conservative on the pro-life issue, LGBTQIA and the alphabet soup people, and you're like, okay, appreciate that. And he wants to eradicate borders, even though he lives in a place that has the most secure border of any nation in the world. You actually can't, so Vatican City is actually a country, and you can't enter unless the Pope welcomes you, and there is no permanent citizenship. You're only there at the behest of the Pope to serve. So the guy who is the most anti-border lives within the strongest border of any nation in the world, which is just a fun fact. But when it comes to issues of like Islam, I'm working on this book, The Four Horsemen. And so I just pulled up a quote. And this is from Vatican News. So this isn't me going to some critic. He says, Jesus taught us to welcome one another as brothers. And this applies first and foremost to us Christians, Jews, and Muslims who worship the one God and who refer, albeit in different ways, to Abraham as father in faith. Mm-hmm. And so he's saying that because Abraham is the kind of the father of faith for Christians, Jews, and Muslims, that we're all worshiping the same God. We're not. And so, Jesus said, I am the God of Abraham. Mm-hmm. So our God is Jesus Christ. That's not the God that is worshiped as the God of Judaism or Islam. And in fact, I've got this in here as well. Islam flatly teaches that Jesus was not the Son of God, that he didn't die on the cross, he didn't rise from the dead, and he is not superior to Muhammad. And so even a good Jew would say, we disagree with the Christians, and a good Muslim would say, we disagree with the Jew. A good Christian would say, I disagree with the Jews and the Muslims. A good Muslim would say they disagree with Christianity and with Judaism. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to create some sort of relational connectivity. And so he used the words, relationship, and he talked about, people loving each other and serving each other. Yeah, that's personal. What we're not talking about is relational. We're talking about governance.
Yep.
in a country, is it to be run by Sharia law or not? Because if you're a devout Muslim, you're like, it needs to be run by Sharia law. Well, this isn't relational.
Yeah.
Right? This is legal. This is federal. This is governmental. And so he's taking two issues and he's confusing them.
Yep.
But to me, just hearing him speak, he's a soft man. And this is part of the problem with the Catholic papacy, the fact that they don't allow their priests to get married. They don't allow them to have children. It entices a soft kind of man to go into an academic and monastic life. And some things publicly, they require hard men. When you're dealing with wars, when you're dealing with immigration and borders, when you're dealing with political issues, soft men are not best capable of making those decisions. And so these are guys too that just practically, they haven't been hardened by fatherhood. They haven't been hardened by marriage. Their instincts toward women and children and being a defender and protector, they're not strong. And so these tend to be weak men, they tend to be woke men, and they tend to be soft men. There are exceptions, but for the most part, a very healthy, strong man wouldn't even want to take a life of celibacy and chastity and poverty. A fact that a man aspires to that. Now, if God calls you to that, I get it. But if that's the job description and only those men can take that job, you are going to lose the best men and you're going to lose the hard men. And this is what you get. You get a very soft man who's wearing a dress talking about relationships, when in Islam, you've got very hard men that can marry up to 4 women and can beat their wives. And they believe in 3 options. You would convert, you die, or you pay a tax as an infidel. And I'll tell you what, those guys are going to populate the earth and they're going to control the future.
Yeah.
And a guy like this, he's got no legacy, he's got no family, he's got no future. And so if this plays itself out, this is the kind of person that gets crushed by Islam.
100%. And yeah, used to spread Islam. I got asked a bunch this week, is this Pope the Antichrist? And it felt like a really loaded question, obviously. So I did some research and shocked to see that that's not a new question in history, especially in church fathers and Luther, Calvin, Knox, Spurgeon. This was something they talked about often.
Within the Reformed tradition of Christianity, there's always been a subset that believes that the Whore of Babylon is the Catholic Church and that the Antichrist is the Pope.
That's wild.
We'll see when we get there.
He doesn't seem capable enough.
No, you would need somebody a little stronger than that. But if I'm Catholic, I'm frustrated because now you've got the Pope speaking on matters that they're not a subject matter expert. And so, you can be a subject matter expert in one area, but that doesn't mean that it transfers to another area. Like, this is why I don't want
climate change and capitalism.
Yeah.
What?
Well, and so Catholicism being a global, faith community, a lot of it is in socialistic nations. And so you're going to want to have a sensitivity or even a tolerance towards socialism. But from a biblical perspective, the Bible is clear about private property ownership, and stealing is, forbidden in the commandments. And so socialism by definition is the first step to Marxism. And it was Karl Marx that said that, and then Vladimir Lenin confirmed that. He said it's a 2-step, and the first step is socialism, the second step is communism. We know that communism is completely and totally atheistic, and so there's a lack of courage, and this is why the Pope is fighting with the president. You've got a soft man and a hard man.
Yep.
And the way people are dividing is oftentimes not over ideology, but simply, are you attracted to a soft man or are you attracted to a hard man?
Yeah.
And hard men are not going to be attracted to this Pope.
No. Yeah, I can't even listen to him. I mean, that's the longest. Every time we saw the clip a few months ago of him blessing a rock, an ice chunk or something like.
Well, and taking off his shoes and walking around with Muslims and honoring, their sacred places. It's like, so this is where
the Catholic Church is like 5 years late on being woke.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that was 2020, guys.
Well, but a part of it is as well is like, again, like a soft man doesn't do conflict. A soft man tries to do nuance.
Yeah.
And we're in a day when, quite frankly, like nuance is over. And I think in particular, younger generations, but especially younger men, they're like, I'm not looking for nuance. I'm not looking for, really crafted statements that try to avoid conflict and controversy. It is more of a prophetic time of just like, hey, be clear and have the conflict.
Yeah. We are seeing record number of young men flocking to the Catholic Church. Mainly, they're sick of big LED walls, the nuanced teachings, things that just look like the world. There's a whole generation of men that are getting saved as a result of Charlie Kirk and his martyrdom. But they're showing up to churches and just seeing soft, limp-wristed pulpits. So then they're seeing Catholicism as something that has tradition and sacrament and, oh, this is something I can latch on and follow. What would you tell those young men as they're trying to discern and understand the difference? And what is the Catholic Church? What is the Christian Church? What is the differences? What is the Pope's role in all this?
Yeah, so if you're trying to find a church, it's a tough day. And that's what we continually hear is it's hard to find a church. And the reason that some people are, especially young men, are maybe moving toward Orthodoxy or Catholicism, maybe they were in an evangelical church, and when an evangelical church slides, it's always to the left. It never slides to the right. Like, you don't, very rarely, if ever, do you see a denomination or a network of churches slide to the right. Mm-hmm. They always slide to the left. And they just keep moving the line. And if you're in that, community, you're wondering, okay, where does it end? And why are we going this direction? So then you look at Catholicism or you look at Orthodoxy and you think, well, they've been around for thousands of years. But depending upon which tradition you're in and depending upon which church or community you're in, it could be even more to the left. Mm-hmm. And so it's less about being under the right big umbrella and finding a local community that is led by someone that has the courage of conviction to stay in their lane and to not deviate. But that is hard because I'll be honest, like right now, my generation, running Christian churches, denominations, networks, seminaries, Bible colleges, publishing houses, they're almost exclusively soft woke, nuanced, third way, trying to navigate between the left and the right. And when they punch, they only punch to the right. They never punch to the left. That's my whole generation. Mm-hmm. And they're failing miserably. And they're not setting an example of good fatherhood and strength and courage for young men. And they're more worried about approval from the left than they are helping young men. Mm-hmm. And so I think for a lot of young men, they just walk into church and they're like, they're not even trying to help. I want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to do the stuff that the Bible says and my big brother Charlie Kirk said, but they're not helping me to do that. But again, think of a Catholic church. How is that guy going to help you do that?
No.
You're like, hey, so when you and your wife have conflicts, I don't have a wife. Okay, so when you're trying to launch a business, he's like, I took a vow of poverty. I don't do money. Okay, well, raising your kids, like I don't have any kids. So how is this guy supposed to help?
If you get the men, you win the war. You lose the men, you lose the war. It's very simple. If you get the men, you get the family. If you get the men, you get the legacy. If you get the men, you get the future. Today, the church is dominated by soft, weak, woke men in leadership. Churches are built for women and children, and I like to say we build men up to bless women and children. How do we start a significant ministry that becomes a movement of spirit-filled, Jesus-loving, Bible-obeying, courageous men loving and leading their families and communities? If you're a mom and you got a son, you know the need. If you're a parent and you've got a son, you know the need. If you're a grandparent with a grandson, you know the need. We're asking you to join us for a brand new group called The Remnant. We're asking you to give generously, sacrificially, regularly. You could text STAND to 99383. Just text STAND to 99383, and you will be part of the provision helping this vision become a reality. And if you're a guy who is a leader, you want to start a men's ministry, and you want your church to stop being pathetic and send your pastor out so we can help him be prophetic, we'd love to do so. Join the Remnant, text STAND to 99383.
When COVID hit, you made me the young adults pastor at Trinity, and Ashley was there serving with me, and young adults went from like 3 people to 100 people in our backyard because we bought a house we got married and we were having kids, and everybody wants to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk, that was his whole message: get married, have kids, follow Jesus. But how do you show up to a church where where the pastor, priest can't get married, have kids, build a life, and you're anti-capitalism? Like, I think that's a hard message for young men to follow, but the tradition makes it feel like, well, it's religion. This feels right.
Yeah. Well, and we've had the conversation offline, and a lot of what is the Catholic Mass is just a repackaged civil meeting from first century Roman Empire.
That was wild when you shared that with me.
So Christianity was outlawed until Constantine. And once it was legalized under Constantine, it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Well, now it's like a branch of the government. Mm-hmm. Now you're using government buildings and government dollars and government protection and support. And so the way the Roman Empire was architected, it had regions, and it had sort of a political judicial leader over each region. Well, then they just overlaid that with a bishop, mm-hmm. a Christian leader that helped in the legal and the spiritual matters. And then the Roman civic meetings, you'd literally walk in and there would be the Roman law books carried in, and there'd be a picture of the emperor, and there'd be this pageantry and procession, and then the Catholic service is really an outgrowth of that. They just said, well, let's take Caesar's picture off and put Jesus' picture up, and let's take the Roman law books down and let's put the Bible up.
Wild.
And so what we think is tradition is actually pretty much just pagan, Roman civic life. Mm-hmm. And so when guys are like, it is so traditional, it's like, well, it's old, but it's not rooted in anything that has any sort of biblical historicity to it. It's Roman civic meeting repackaged.
Mm-hmm. It's wild. And it's, I get it. For young men, they're trying to find truth in the gospel.
Trying to find something that won't move on them. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up in evangelicalism. I grew up Catholic, and I went to Catholic school, and I was an altar boy and some of that kind of stuff. But then, once I jumped into the mainstream of evangelicalism, I'm disappointed. I'm devastated. I didn't grow up in it, but I just see it continually sliding into soft woke, cowardice. You've got the weakest men running the most important institutions. And if I was a young man, I would be really disappointed. But even as an older man, I'm really disgusted.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So going back to the Catholic, the Pope, will there be do Catholics go to heaven?
Well, it all comes down to Jesus. And so the church doesn't save, Jesus saves. Mm-hmm. And the church doesn't mediate, Jesus mediates. And this is one of the big conflicts with Catholicism. And so are there born again, Jesus loving brothers and sisters in Christ in the Catholic Church? Yes, many. But simply being part of the institution doesn't curry any favor with God. It's like Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's only Jesus. And so, but what I have grave concern about is when he is trying to soften the approach to Islam. Islam is a great enemy historically of Christianity. And where Islam has spread, Christianity has been subjugated, and Christians have been slaughtered, and the churches have been closed. And so, to think that Islam would want to be friends with Christianity and the church and want to have a peaceable coexistence. I've got it in the book I'm working on, but so Muhammad himself, he started in Mecca and he was peaceful, didn't really have any success. He moves to Medina. He becomes a warlord. Mm-hmm. He assembles a militia. They kill 1,000 men. They enslave the women and children. They behead the men. Gosh. And so he becomes a warlord. Yeah. And so Islam has always spread by violence and force. And so if you think that making peace with Islam is something that they are willing to do, they're not. They see that as weakness. Again, the hard men see the soft men as targets. And the soft men are just asking, hey, can we have a relationship? Sure we can. I can behead you and take your wife. Mm-hmm. How about that relationship?
Yep. 100%. Islam will not ever coexist. Christians are willing, Muslims are not.
Well, because so Islam is not a religion. It is a total dominating lifestyle.
Yep.
And it demands to run the court system. It demands to run the legal system and the political system and the religious system. So we tend to think in America like, well, that's just their religion. No, their religion is totalitarian.
Yeah.
And so it's like being in North Korea. There's no separation between church and state in North Korea.
No.
So Islam has a similar ideology, and that is total domination. And that's what it is required to be a faithful Muslim, is that you would bring Islam to bear in every area of society. And so if you're a Christian now, are you willing to be under Islamic rule? Well, the answer is you can't be, because now you're an infidel. And again, you have three choices: convert, die, or pay the infidel tax. Mm-hmm. Those are your options. And so wherever Christianity has been and then Islam comes, Christianity is no longer there. For example, in the book of Revelation, John writes to 7 churches, and if you look, today it's Turkey. Mm-hmm. So the book of Revelation is written basically to the nation of Turkey, which today is the least Christian nation on the earth. There are less Christians in Turkey than the church that I pastor.
That's wild.
The whole country.
That's wild.
There were Christians in Iraq until, Saddam Hussein fell and ISIS moves in. The Christians are gone.
Egypt was a Christian nation for like 700 years.
And it's gone. And so you can look, you don't have to be smart. You just have to be honest.
Yeah.
And say, wherever Islamic rule has gone, has Christianity flourished? And the answer is no, it's obliterated.
Yeah, that's where guys like Nick Freitas right now are talking about it. And Tucker and some voices like that are very pro-Islam and kind of rebranding it. And it's like, can we just look at history and the facts? Like we're not making any inferences here. Look at what it's done to every nation it's been in.
Yeah, and the guys gave us some interesting stats. And so for example, in Turkey since 1990, 99% reduction in Christianity. Iraq, 90% reduction in Christianity. Syria, 80% reduction in Christianity. Egypt, a 50 to 75% drop in Christianity.
And the Christians didn't just necessarily leave. A lot of them were slaughtered.
A lot of them are slaughtered, and then a lot of them are forced to leave country if they want to survive. Mm-hmm. And so to say, hey, this can work, it's like, well, how many failed experiments do you need to run till you come to the conclusion that it's a false hypothesis? It doesn't work.
It does not work.
Well, no, to be honest, like, you want to put Sharia law over me as a Bible-believing heterosexual male Christian? You want to create a world where a man can marry 4 women and he can legally beat his wife?
Women are worth half as much as a man?
Yeah, and their testimony in court is similar. It's like, if that is the government that I am under as a Bible-believing Christian with a wife and kids, we're going to have a hell of a conflict, because I can't live under that, because I see that as demonic oppression.
Mm-hmm. 100%, as you should. And I think that's why everyone's asking the question with the Pope right now of like, why are you trying to mediate and reconcile these two things that are not irreconcilable? So
what does good have to do with evil? What does light have to do with darkness? What does God have to do with Satan? The answer is nothing. But again, hard men are willing to make those hard calls, and soft men are trying to reconcile things. And so it is actually a grave sin to have compassion toward evil, to have empathy toward evil, and try and reconcile with evil. And it may say they're so loving, they're so compassionate, they're so kind, and they're so relational. And it's evil, because to take right and wrong and try and bring them together.
It says in the last days that teachers will rebrand evil for good and good for evil.
That's the spirit of Antichrist in every generation is.
So is the Pope a false teacher?
So on the issues of the Trinity, the death, burial, resurrection of Christ, Christ is fully human and fully God. He is not heretical. On issues of policy and politics and borders and ecumenical interfaith relationships, he is headed in a direction that does not lead to faithful Christianity. So is he a Christian? Seems to be. Is he naive? Yes. Is he misled? Yes. Is he very soft? Yes. Is the direction he's going wrong? Yes.
Yeah. It's like a little bit of dog poop in the brownies. Yeah. There's dog poop in the brownies.
Yeah.
Like if we're heading towards we all serve the same Jesus. There's a
well,
problem
yeah. When you say that Muslims, Christians, and Jews all worship the same God, just sit down a true Christian and a true Muslim and ask, okay, do you both worship Jesus Christ? And the answer is
No.
no. So even a faithful Muslim doesn't agree with that. And this is where it's unkind to rebrand what even our opponents think to make it more palatable. But it's like, that's not what they think.
That's where I'm struggling with, like, all right, if you're a false teacher in that area.
Yeah, once we get to, so there's closed-handed and open-handed issues. So socialism, I'd put it closed-handed. I'd put it closed-handed adjacent. But like, let's say, borders or immigration policies.
Yeah.
Okay, but like when you get to, okay, is the God of Islam the same as the God of Christianity? That is a absolutely closed-handed issue.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it within Catholicism too. I mean, they're really big on the church creeds, and the church creeds are exceedingly clear on the issues regarding Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is here venturing into a space that doesn't even agree with creedal Catholicism.
Exactly. That's what I'm struggling with it, because everybody is trying to be very nuanced with him, and like, well, he says some really good things, and he's got these other things, and then they're comparing, well, why aren't more pastors calling out Trump and what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. Well, Trump is not the leader of one of the largest religions in the world.
Well, and his job is to represent American interests. That's the president's job. But part of the issue with this pope as well is in the past you have a Polish pope, you have an Italian pope, and then there's translation into English, and there can always be, sorry, that was mistranslated. Yeah. But now we have an American pope.
We have a Chicago pope.
Yeah, and so like he's speaking English for himself, which means you can't blame it on a mistranslation.
Yep, 100%. Well, speaking of failed experiments, as you were just talking, wanted to talk about Congress in America, and it feels like it's completely gone. As a young guy looking at our political system, I'm looking and watching affair after affair, marriages blowing up. There was actually an affair that happened that resulted in the person that was going to expose killing themselves, which is horrific and horrible. But the Congress, their approval rating is at an all-time low, 15%. They all seem to become wealthy very quickly. The minute they get into Congress, suddenly their stock portfolios take off. It's wild. But it feels like they can't govern themselves, so can they govern America? So I'm just struggling as a young guy looking at it all and trying to assess what should we do with this system? What are your thoughts on Congress and where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point of like, if you can't govern yourself, why should you be given other people and things to govern? Mm-hmm. Like if you don't have dominion over your drawers, you shouldn't get a promotion. You've got to, and so, but part of it as well is this is what happens when, not entirely, but this is Christless conservatism. And so what happens within a lot of politicians that are even conservative, if they're Christless, there's no grounding, there's no rooting, there's no authority, there's no fear of God, there's no discipleship, there's no teaching, there's no pastor. And so I know for a fact that even most politicians that are Christians, they don't go to church, they're not under spiritual authority, they don't have a pastor, and nobody's checking in on their marriage and family. Mm-hmm. And that's a recipe for disaster, because now what you're doing is you're taking someone who's probably away from home a lot in D.C., and D.C. is, an environment that, let's just say, is godless, and it's a lot of favors, and it's a lot of wickedness, and it's a lot of darkness. And so if you're that person and you're away from your family and you don't have a church and you don't have a pastor and nobody's checking in on you and you're not under any authority and you're not being discipled and you're not being called to repentance and you're not doing word and sacrament and you're a Christless conservative, eventually you're just going to be exposed as a fraud and a hypocrite. You're going to be the guy who's selling family values while committing adultery on your wife. And this is what we know. What do we not know? Mm-hmm. What do we not know? I mean, without naming names, some of the political leaders and some of the commentators that I know, they say that the adultery and the hookup and the hotel rooms, they said it's just common knowledge, and it's like an NBA player on tour.
Yeah,
it's just part of the job description.
Yep.
And so if you are a Christian, you don't want just conservative leaders. You want people that are grounded and have a fear of God and live under some sort of authority. Otherwise, they're just hypocrites. Mm-hmm. And it is discouraging.
It is. It's very discouraging, and you're speaking at a men's conference this summer with Pastor Josh McPherson up in Washington, because their state has gotten so bad. They've decided to send one of their campus pastor into the belly of the beast, Adam James, and he's doing a great job up there and taking a lot of ground.
Yeah, he's a great man.
Josh's playbook and a lot of the conversations we're having behind closed doors is that pastors should get involved. Dads, business leaders, good godly guys need to throw themselves into politics, or else we're going to lose this nation.
Well, and when it was said, hey, pastors and churches should not be involved politically, it's like, well, then that means that the politicians have no churches and pastors. Mm-hmm. Like, do you really want the politicians to not have a church and a pastor, be under authority and getting discipled? Because this is what happens. Mm-hmm. You've got Christless conservatives that are maybe even claiming Jesus but not walking with him in any real meaningful way, and suddenly that becomes the majority line for the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And then it does hurt us with the left, because then it's like, well, they're all a bunch of hypocrites. It's like, well, on the left they're all a bunch of perverts, so mm-hmm. It's not like either one can win the plank spec game. But yeah, if I'm a young man, I would encourage, be involved nationally, but really hyper-focus locally.
Yep.
You can actually know local politicians, and the end of the day, you can't control what happens at the White House, but you can control what happens at your house.
Yep.
And I think it's becoming hyper-focused on, where has God given me authority and dominion? This is my property. This is my business. This is my church. This is my wife. These are my kids. These are the areas that I can affect change, and maybe there'll be a hypocrite leading, but not at my house.
Yep.
And you're going to stand before God and give an account for whatever your assignment was. And we need to be civically, politically, culturally engaged, to be sure. But I don't want young men, number one, to have a sense of nihilism, like it's all just a waste of time and energy. No, your life is meaningful, valuable, purposeful. You can have a family and a life and a future and lead people to Christ and do what God has appointed you to do. And in addition to that, a lot of men will use this as an excuse to do nothing.
Uh-huh.
It's like, well, the system is broken, so burn it. And this is the kind of burn it all down.
Yeah.
But all that is deconstructionism from the right.
Yep.
And deconstruction is always just burn it all down. Well, okay, but if you burn the house down, what are we going to live in? Mm-hmm. Do you have a build plan to replace it with something better? Because the truth is, we're all sinners by nature and choice, and it's a broken, flawed world. And even if there was a perfect system, the sinners would ruin it, because that's what we do.
For sure. We will never have heaven on earth. It has always been pretty bad. Like, America was born out of a pretty bad society, and then America has become a pretty bad society. Like, evil and wickedness are in this world.
Yeah, no, and as Christians, we believe in the curse, we believe in the fall, which means we need to be primarily committed to evangelism. Mm-hmm. If you think that the solution is political, all politics can do is give you freedom to preach the gospel, and then the gospel is what actually transforms and changes mm-hmm. people. So unless they really get saved, born again, and discipled to be mature in their faith, nothing changes. It's just, mm-hmm. it's hypocrisy from the right, and it's perversion from the left.
100%. So, I think those are really wise words for the young men. I think there's so many extremes right now. There's the red pill, there's now black pill, which is nihilism, and then the woke right, and it is hard to, the pendulum's just swinging, and young men are trying to figure it out. Yeah. And the answer is always going to be Jesus, and the Bible is a pretty good instruction manual for what we should be doing as young men.
Yeah, and I raised, our 5 kids in, urban Seattle.
Yep.
Which is a super majority of just progressivism, and now has a mayor that is a complete buffoon, zero qualification socialist. And my hope was, I'm going to lead people to Jesus, and I'm going to raise a family and build my marriage and invest in our children.
Yep.
And so, at the end of the day, some people met Jesus, and I have a family that I love and am very, very grateful for. And everybody else is responsible for their decisions. Mm-hmm. But if it keeps you from, doing evangelism, talking to others about Jesus, getting married and starting a family, then all of a sudden you have lost the opportunity to actually enjoy your life, because you focused on all the aspects of it that are unenjoyable.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And being deconstructing, being frustrated with the world, being a victim, you'll never build anything, and you'll end up on meds. And the solution is Jesus and building something that is in your control.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, right now, like, to close this, like, I mean, you've got your son, who's my grandson. Like, you know, I have grandkids, and at the end of the day, they're a tremendous blessing and joy. And I want to fight for a future that is best case scenario for them. But I'm glad that they're here, and the God who was faithful to me will need to be faithful to them.
yep. 100%. And for young men, the minute you get married and then have a kid, any sense of nihilism goes out the window, because it's about a world for your son and your daughter and their kids.
Totally.
So I think we just focus on ourselves way too much, and we don't focus on Jesus enough. Well, thank you, Pastor Mark, for that. I think that's super helpful. All right, the next one's going to be fun. So getting into Sodom and Gomorrah, gay dads. So wanted to show you this clip. Really don't want to show you this clip. It is horrific. You want to have physical violence after watching this clip.
Who do you want, Dada or Pop?
Mama.
No, Mama. Do you want Dada or Pop? Who do you want, Dada or Pop? Nope. Do you want Dada? You want Pop? No way, Jose. No way, Jose. I think. Oh. There is no Mama. I'm so sorry. You have Dada and you have Pop. Two choices. No Mama. No. No Mama. Dada or Pop. No.
So they're mocking this child.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry and violence. I mean,
Violence.
it's like you're mocking a child. You're mocking your own child. And the truth is, the child does have a mother somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it didn't come out of him.
No. These guys are occultists.
They bought this kid. It was a surrogate. So they paid some woman to have their child.
Yeah. And so they're, the child doesn't fully understand what they're saying, but there is a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so
He wants his mom. Indy, you can spend the day with me. He wants his mom. He loves his mom way more than me. Like, he loves his dad. He respects his dad. We have a great relationship, but he wants his mom.
So there is literally a physical, spiritual bond between a mother and child. And because the child is created and cultivated within the woman. And so the biology on this is breathtaking and it's shocking, but there's a connection at a biological and a spiritual level between a mother and child. And so, so surrogacy then removes that child from that mother, which is damaging to both the mother and the child. So gays should not be able to adopt. Gays should not be able to do parenting. Mm-hmm. They have a mental health problem. The older
they were likely sexually abused, so they're gay. So then they have a child that'll likely be sexually abused by them.
Well, and so at the end of the day, it's like, Paul says in Romans 1, I'm just going to get clearer as I get older. He says it's unnatural. Mm-hmm. And they exchange natural relations with women for unnatural relations. And so the lifestyle does not produce life. Therefore, the lifestyle should not be parenting life. Mm-hmm. And a man and a woman can produce life, so they should be able to parent life. And if for some reason there's a biological problem and they need to do, they want to do adoption or foster care or other things, or try and use, fertility mechanisms to have a child, that is working through a brokenness in the biology. Homosexual relationship, the biology is non-reproductive.
Yep.
God created this act so that it does not produce parents and life. Mm-hmm. And so, I am against same-sex couples being married. I'm against them adopting children. I'm against them doing surrogacy. I'm against them doing foster care.
And it is sexual perversion. I mean, being gay and married.
Yeah, and it's, why are you gay? I mean, Were you abused? Is there trauma? Do you have a porn addiction? What is the trigger and cause? Or are you just a pervert? Either way. But then to mock a child.
I mean, it describes who they are.
And to mock your child, and then to put it online.
The internet.
Thinking that this is entertaining or interesting when it's actually horrifying and maddening.
It's very maddening. Any Christian man with a kid is like, I'm going to kill him.
It's like, if this is the kind of parent you are, you just prove that you shouldn't have a child.
For sure shouldn't. And to prove that point, I wanted to share two recent cases that are being tried right now. Gay couple William and Zachary Zuluk adopted two young brothers and then repeatedly raped them, made CSAM, which is child porn, pimped them to a pedophile ring, and they're both being sentenced to 100 years in jail. And then the second case in the UK, gay couple Jamie and John had a 13-month-old infant placed for adoption. They sexually assaulted him to the point of killing him. After 3 months, sexually assaulting an infant boy. So this is horrific, evil, demonic, and being gay is horrific, evil, and demonic.
Well, and I don't know if we're going to show the RFK clip, but then that we have the administration prior outlawing Christians from parenting.
Yeah, I think we should roll that clip and then get into kind of the juxtaposition in our culture right now is awful.
President Trump and the First Lady, who has been extraordinary for us to work with, have said their vision is one family for one child. Right now, we have a 2-to-1 ratio. And part of the reason for that is that the Biden administration was excluding an entire class of people because of their religious beliefs and told the states to actually pass laws, instructed them to pass laws refusing families who had certain religious beliefs, mainly Christian religious beliefs, to not be allowed to have children. And that dramatically constricted the pool of available parents.
That's horrifying. I mean, if you're gay, you can have the child, even though your lifestyle cannot produce life. If you are heterosexual, married Christian couple that has a lifestyle that can produce life, and maybe you've already successfully raised and parented children or in the process of doing so, you are denied from raising children because of the trans cult that dominated America in a previous administration.
I mean, it's wild. We have really good friends, probably the best parents I know, some of the best boys I've ever met, and they were trying to adopt during the Biden administration through foster care, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it took 2 years, and they're like, well, I guess we can't do it. And they felt called by God to do it. And I think this is unearthing exactly why they couldn't, because they were a godly Christian home.
Totally.
That's disgusting.
It is completely disgusting. And you look at it, and this is where it'll lead into the next segment with even, Christians, air quotes, that were for Kamala Harris, who carried, she's part of the Biden administration. She was just the awake member
Barely.
Of the leadership.
She was awake, just on drugs all the time.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, so we're going to push a very anti-life, pro-death agenda of abortion, and Harris and Waltz were abortion up to birth, the most radical, draconian, murderous ticket in the history of the nation. We know for a fact that they were targeting pro-life groups and pro-life protesters that are even peaceably protesting. And then if a child makes it out of the womb somehow miraculously, we're going to give it to a same-sex couple that hates God. And if the Christians would like to open their home and raise a child, they're discriminated against in the name of tolerance and diversity. Mm-hmm. This is, woe to those who call evil good and good evil and light darkness and darkness light. It is an upside down world. So then when you have Christian leaders that are coming out and saying, and you should vote for this kind of ticket, literally what you are is at that point, you are a false teacher. Mm-hmm. You're leading people astray.
Yep.
And, I of course, I pastor a church, and we've seen this. I've seen this my entire career. I spent my first 20 years in downtown Seattle, and Christian couples trying to do foster care, trying to do adoption, just lawfare against them, and having to sign things like, I will, give LGBTQIA curriculum and education to the child. It's like, well, the child's 2, or child's 4. So I don't know why I need to sign a statement talking about genitalia and sexual pleasure. It's a child. What we're going to learn to do is read and write and eat soup. And so this is where America has been dominated by a perverse, oppressive, demonic cult of sexuality that is transgender, that is gay and non-binary, and altogether antichrist. And if everybody held that ideology, the nation would cease to exist in a generation. There would be no.
It would go so quick.
That's why we're allowing open borders, because we have declining population. And so, yeah, to me, this is just, it's reprehensible. But to see men mocking a child and to think that it's funny and then to post it on the internet thinking that the rest of us would find their perspective helpful is breathtaking and shocking. And it just goes to show a young child needs a mother. Needs a mother. And I mean, I've got a grandson who's about this exact same age. They're probably literally within a few weeks of each other. This just goes to prove that you need a mom, because a mom sure as hell ain't going to do this to a child.
Smack that guy.
and a mom is a caregiver and a nurturer, and she births the child, and she is the best person to raise the child.
100%. 100%. And, well, I just thought I'd make this transition. Pastor Mark, speaking of gay men, I wanted to show you a clip of David French.
Okay.
You didn't call him gay, I did.
I'm not saying he's strong. I'm saying...
I'm furious at the Republican Party, and I definitely wanted to punish them. And I'm furious at the Republican Party because what it did in service of Donald Trump was it took out the pro-life plank in the Republican Party platform. There's no more call for the Human Life Amendment. It's now a functionally pro-choice platform by state.
But I'm livid about that too, and I talked about that, and I would never vote for Kamala Harris. And you lived in a red state during this time, and so you know that electorally your vote was not contributing to her victory and wouldn't really, in practicality, hold Donald Trump accountable. So it was so important to your conscience to vote for the, I think, rapidly more pro-abortion candidate in Kamala Harris, and that's hard for me to square.
No, and also my problem, Allie Beth, is I'm looking at a world where under that dude, abortions went up. For 40 years before.
But for lots of reasons, as we've already talked about.
Yes, but see,
that he is not the monocausal
It's not
reason,
monocausal, but he's part of it. I believe he's part of it.
What?
And also,
what did he do that caused abortions to rise?
What I'm saying is, as I said earlier, this is a man who contributed to an extraordinary growth in libertinism, especially on the right.
Okay, do we have data that shows us that it's more people on the right that were getting abortions under Donald Trump?
It's the whole, we don't have data.
Okay, so tell me what you can prove that Donald Trump contributed to the rise in abortions.
If you have 40 years of uninterrupted decline in abortion, 40 years, and then you have an increase in abortion in 2017, and you have an increase in abortion.
And you don't think it has anything to do with the president who was in office 8 years before that?
Well, the president who was in office 8 years before that, he had 330,000 fewer abortions. But you don't think that his policy or his advocacy had any contribution to the increase in abortion? I'm just looking for I think his policies contributed.
Is that just a theory that you have, or
I think his policies contributed to the decrease in abortion.
And do you, okay, well, I'm interested in which policies specifically, but which policies for Trump contributed to the increase in abortion under Trump?
I think it's the cultural
effect. In 2017, he had just become president.
I think it's the cultural effect of Donald Trump. And
so you think the cultural effect of Donald Trump made MAGA more libertine, which I wouldn't necessarily disagree on that. For me, I see it more in the endorsement of gay marriage and all of that kind of stuff, which I'm adamantly against. Do you have any data that shows that it's MAGA that was getting more abortions? Because that's the only way your argument makes sense to me.
I like Allie.
She's great.
She's great. And she did a great job. And so what you'll get is soft, woke, progressive, air quote, Christians are given platforms, and they're given platforms because the left wants to find a way to deconstruct conservative, Bible-based, heterosexual, masculine Christianity. And so David French is part of the problem. He's over at the New York Times as a columnist, but he's in the same ideology and ecosphere as like Christianity Today. And most of your soft woke Christian denominations, Bible colleges, seminaries, which are all dying and closing because young men are returning to faith, but they're not returning to that form of faith. Mm-hmm. Young men are not, and so he's about my age. I think he's about 57. I'm 55. Mm-hmm. My generation is a damnable failure in Christian leadership, a damnable failure. And it started early on. I didn't grow up in evangelicalism. Let me get to the how we got here. I didn't grow up in evangelicalism. I grew up son of a drywaller, Jack Catholic. Mm-hmm. I get saved reading the Bible. And so I go to a good Bible teaching church, and then, my platform starts to grow, and I start getting invited into media opportunities, and then I get invited into the heart of evangelicalism to publish and to speak and to write. And I quickly find that theologically, I agree with the founders of evangelicalism, like the J.I. Packers and the Francis Schaeffers and the Billy Grahams. I do not fit within evangelicalism politically or leadership style whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And within the center of evangelicalism, it's very weak. It's soft woke. It's very feminine. It's very nuanced. And it is only and always punching to the right, never to the left. And it started when I was a young man, probably about your age. There was something called the Emerging Church. So they brought together a bunch of young leaders, and then it morphed into the Emerging Church, and it became the deconstruction of conservative masculine Christianity. And this subtle movement of deconstructionism on the right, it started when I was a young man, and I was probably at ground zero with guys like Rob Bell and Brian McLaren and Tony Jones and Doug Padgett. And today they would be sort of the guys that are in the same camp as a David French, as a Christianity Today. It's all that same swamp. And so for me, it means that they're moving to the left, but it starts with asking questions, and then it moves to subtle compromises. Mm-hmm. But over time, the slide is always to the left, and then you get to the point where there's a pressure point, a fulcrum, like within an election. It's like, well, who are you voting for? Yep. And then they come out of the closet and they're like, Kamala Harris. And you're like, okay, so you're taking the most murderous, abortion, pro-trans ticket in the history of the nation and stamping Jesus on it because you absolutely hate Donald Trump, and you're so driven by bitter envy and selfish ambition, to quote the book of James. You hate this man so much that you will align with someone who is not only against him, but against Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything that David French is for, like James Tallarico, he's defended him. And James Tallarico said Jesus was pro-abortion. And French has defended him and won't say he's not a Christian. He's now supporting, French supports same-sex marriage. Like, you are taking a demonic ideology and stamping Jesus on it.
Yeah.
And you're not a Christian first. You're a politician first. You're demonic first. And then you're confusing everybody by calling yourself the Christian columnist. Like, this is very dangerous, especially for all these new young men that have become Christians, because they walk in and they're like, is that it?
No, so they follow Charlie Kirk. He's courageous. He's not a coward. He's clear. He's not nuanced. And he is a Christian conservative. Mm-hmm. And so those young men are not going to follow. They're not going to go to. So these are the guys. So David French, if you just photocopied him, these are the guys that run all the Bible colleges. Yep. These are the guys that run all the seminaries. They run a lot of the networks. They run the denominations. They run the publishing houses. They run the conferences. Mm-hmm. Smarmy, academic. We never know anything about their marriage. We never know anything about their children. Like, did they lead at home? Is there any fruit in their life? Because 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, if you want to be a leader in the church, like, well, what's your life and your marriage and your family? Like, that's your resume.
Well, and this guy, David French, his wife, her Twitter says she lives in a different state, and then he stopped wearing his wedding ring when he speaks. Yeah. And people are jumping to conclusions, and we don't need to, but If you stopped wearing your wedding ring,
And if Grace lived in another state, well, and that's where too. Like, where's your family? Where's your flock? And so these sort of ideological pontificators, it's like they don't have a family that we know about. I mean, it's usually hidden, and they don't have any flock. It's like, well, where is the fruit of your ideology? You're like, well, I'm not investing in any people. Then you're not doing ministry. You're just you're a left-wing blowhard who is criticizing the right and getting paid to do so because you were a tool of deconstruction on the right. And whether or not you love Donald Trump, what I said going into the election was there's personalities and there's policies. And when you vote, you better emphasize the policies, because you could have a very nice person who's evil. You could have a very kind person who is incompetent. At this point, I don't need the president of the United States of America to be the pastor for the United States of America. I just need them to get all the debris off the runway so that we can do Christian life.
100%. I mean, for like this week, he's the White House reads the Bible. He's reading the Bible and on TV, and Christians want to criticize him, talk about how awful he is, and yeah, he's making a couple missteps on social media specifically, but in all of history, and especially biblical history, the Israelites would have, cheered to have a guy like Trump in office rather than a pagan king that was sacrificing children.
Yeah.
He doesn't even need to be a Christian, as long as his policies are...
They're not against us.
At least not against us.
Just give me neutral.
Yeah.
It'd be great if the president was positive toward conservative, heterosexual Christianity. Give me neutral. Don't give me complete negative, where they are, encroaching socialism, stealing money from hardworking men to fund things that are against our God, against heterosexuality, against our children and our family and our faith. Don't take my money to do things that are against my God. At least be neutral. But, I am very glad that in the election, President Trump won. I'm very glad. I mean, the fact that we were going to hand over the country to again, even on the life issue, if you're a Christian, the most pro-death, murderous.
She pledged to restore Roe.
Well, and she even said too that there wouldn't be exceptions for religious conviction. And so now you would be looking at even Christian organizations having to fund and support abortion in violation of conscience. I mean, and make no mistake, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, they both claim to be Christians, but they're progressive, mainline denomination, apostate, false teacher type of pseudo-Christians.
They're using Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate Ali Beth Stuckey kind of pushing the point. But again, over and over and over, it's soft men that are literally progressive in their heart because they are effeminate and soft. They're triggered by strong men like Donald Trump. We don't know anything about their families. They don't have a flock. And the truth is, nobody is following them. I mean, like this ideology, there's not going to be a surge of young men who are saying, tell me more. Where do I sign up for the newsletter? Because I want to be discipled by this guy.
No.
But that's my whole generation, and it's a freaking embarrassment. It's tragic. We should have had a generation of fathers, and instead we have soft woke beta males and cowards. And now that God has activated a young generation of men coming to church, they're having a hard time finding spiritual fathers and leaders. And even if you're an older Christian man, your job is to be helpful.
Yep.
Fighting Donald Trump all day is not helpful. Helping young men figure out how do you get activated, discipled, get married, buy a house, have some kids. That's being helpful. And this is just, this is building a platform by attacking a man because you're triggered by him, because he's strong and you're weak and he's hard and you're soft.
100%. Super helpful, Pastor Mark. Yeah, today's show was interesting. We talked a lot about weak, soft men that don't seem to have courage to deliver the actual gospel.
Well, since Genesis 3, that's the problem. Weak, soft, passive men. It's always the problem.
It's always the problem. And they seem to misstep and nuance things like immigration. And this month, the team, you forwarded it and the team wrote it, but Immigrant Jesus. We wrote the book, and if you want to understand what the Bible really says about immigration and borders, was Jesus an immigrant? Some of the top questions, and actually be educated, not just look at what the world is saying about things like immigration and ICE and the biblical context. We wrote the book for you. So if you text right now ICE to 99383, we'll send you a free chapter of the newest resource, and you can get the rest of the book there. And if you want to get notified every time Pastor Mark goes live, text live to 99383. That's live to 99383. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys next week.